This is boring. This is exciting! I love my Strifes, and today we're going to turn this wimpy stock Strife into a super Strife. I'm Ryan from Make Test Battle. Join me for the ride. Nobody will blink an eyelid at a stock Strife.
Okay.
But a super Strife will have them ducking for cover. Before we begin, let's go over the parts and tools you'll need for this project. A basic collection of hand tools are required. You will need some screwdrivers, side cutters, pliers, and a knife. A Dremel is also a must-have. I always use mine with a flexible shaft. For soldering, you will need a soldering iron, wire strippers, and handy hands. A magnet tray and a small parts bin are always useful. The consumables in this build are solder, 4mm heat shrink, 18 AWG silicone wire, and a microswitch. The main parts are the WFK130SZ Falcon 130 motors and a 1000 mAh 3S LiPo, for which you will need the appropriate plug. A balancing LiPo charger and a battery tester are also suggested. Links to all of the items that I use can be found in the description. This will be a total overhaul, so let's get that blaster out of the box and take it apart. Unscrew everything and separate the halves. The only part that will stay in is the mag release, so let's get everything else out. For a simple mod, you could simply bypass the thermistor here and use Trussfire batteries, but we're doing things properly. Everything comes out. Take care to keep all the parts safe. Only a few pieces will be discarded when you put it back together. To go further, we will need to get the electrical wires out. So unscrew the motor cage and this hold down plate. The pusher and the trigger are easily removed, leaving us to remove the electrical locks. We don't need any of these parts except for the rev trigger button and spring. Once the cage is out of the blaster, the wiring is held in place by the battery terminals. Unscrew the circuit board and snip the connections. Everything should now lift right out. We still need to get rid of the battery tabs to fit our LiPo in the tray, so bend up the connection points and pull them out with a pair of pliers. The battery spacers are no longer needed, so just pop those out as well. We'll be swapping in new motors, so we need to get the old ones out first. Peel off the rubber straps and snip away the connections. Before we can pull the motors out, we need to take the flywheels off. Press open these 4 tabs with a screwdriver to get access to the inside of the cage. Once that's done, the flywheels can easily be pressed off with a pair of screwdrivers through the holes in the back. Finally, the motors should pull right out with a pair of pliers. To supply enough power to our motors, a high current battery such as a LiPo is essential. We'll be fitting this 1000 mAh 3S in the battery tray. It's just big enough with a few modifications to the shell. We need to flatten out the dividing tabs and open up the upper area. Let's knock out those with the Dremel. We still need a bit more room for the LiPo to fit, so let's take out that convenient top area and take the advertising with it. The LiPo still won't fit nicely due to the ridges on the door, so let's swap to a grinding bit and flatten them down. Now that's nice and flat, it should close nicely. While we have our Dremel out, let's finish the other few shell modifications we need to make. These tabs will stop our larger motors from fitting, so cut them out. When we go to run our new wires in the blaster, it's very helpful if this small web is removed, so cut out a small slot here. The final shell modification that needs to be done is to allow the larger, high ampage microswitch to fit behind the rev trigger. This will be hot glued eventually, so take enough out to allow it to fit nicely. Your individual switch will affect this part, but this is what I did. I also cut off the roller to allow it to fit a bit better. The last bit of dremeling is in the flywheel cage. Stock motors are smaller than replacement motors, so you will need to grind off the tabs to allow them to fit. Once done, place your motors in and ensure the marking red dot is on opposite sides. Let's get soldering. Make sure you can identify the common, normally open, and normally closed ports on your switch. The normally open will allow electricity to only flow when the switch is depressed, so we want to use that and the common tabs. The circuit diagram is very simple in this build. Positive to the red dot on the motor will make it spin clockwise, so in this orientation we want positive to the front. The negative wire will go to the switch. Our circuit is complete by linking the motors back to the LiPo plug. The easiest way to get your wires the right size is to lay them in place, then cut them to length. Always add extra. you can cut it back later. We'll be using a neat trick for the motor connections, so add a fair bit of extra wire. Once we have our pieces, let's get soldering. Use wire strippers to remove the insulation on the shorter black LiPo plug wire and twist the strands neatly together. For a good electrical connection, tin the wire by melting a small amount of solder onto the iron, placing it against the wire to heat it up, then allowing the solder to melt into the wire as it heats up enough. Ensure the solder nicely covers the entire wire. Repeat this with the common switch tab, melting enough solder on it for a good electrical connection. To join the switch and the wire, simply use the iron to remelt the solder together and allow it to cool without moving the wire. Repeat this process for the longer motor wire and attach it to the normally open terminal. We'll be using a neat method to join both motors with one piece of wire. You can find a detailed version of this part for our guide on our channel soon. Line up the wire on the motor with a small excess on the end terminal. Use your finger to mark the position a bit behind the other terminal. Then, use a knife with a medium amount of pressure to score and cut the insulation without cutting the wire strands. Use your fingers to peel back the insulation a small amount, then twist the strands together. Holding the wire tightly, strip the end of the wire as normal. The silicone insulation is quite flexible and can be adjusted if needed. Let's repeat this for the positive wire. Mark the position and use the knife to cut the insulation. Expose a small area, twist it together, then strip the end. If everything worked right, you should be able to solder the same wire to both motors. Tin the middle sections and the end of the wire as normal. So that we can solder to the motors successfully, we need to tin the terminals. Don't use too much solder, or you may risk it connecting to the motor casing and causing a short circuit. Once tinned, we can attach the wires as normal. It's best to attach the middle piece first, then the end. Make sure to attach the wires the right way round and in the correct orientation. As you can see here, the wires go off to the left so that they fit nicely back into the shell. There we have it. Finalize the motor cage by placing on the back straps to keep the motors secure and press the flywheels back on. Hot glue is the easiest way to mount the switch. Cake it in and seat your switch in position, ensuring it clicks nicely. Make sure not to get any glue on the lever arm or the button. So much hot glue. A LiPo battery will have a specific plug to connect to it. For our battery, we'll be using a male XT60 plug. For neatness, snip the wires to the same length after pathing them through the blaster. Strip, twist, and tin both of these ends as normal. To prevent any short circuits, we will need to heat shrink the terminals of our plug, so cut two 2cm pieces of heat shrink and slide them over the wire, as far up as possible. To attach the plug, fill the terminal with solder, then remelt and insert the wire. Make sure to attach the wires to the correct terminals. When cooled, slide the heat shrink as far as possible onto the plug. The residual heat should shrink it slightly and hold it in place. Repeat for the other terminal. When that's all done, use a heat gun, lighter, or a soldering iron to finish the shrinking. Done! Plug your LiPo in and give it a test. If the motors spin the wrong way, cut off the heat shrink and flip the wires. It's a bit useless like this, so let's get everything back together. Pop the trigger and pusher back in and screw them into place. The last bits to go back in are the sling points, the jam door, the muzzle extension piece, and the other half of the flywheel cage, then the tactical rail tabs. Screw the flywheel cage down tightly and replace the wire hold down plate, then close up the blaster and screw it back together. Connect the LiPo and place it in your battery tray, curl up the wires, and close the lid on your new Super Strife. All done! As you saw in the beginning, this thing will get up to 115 feet per second at the muzzle. Now the hardest part is figuring out where on the wall it can go. I'm running out of space for these things. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we do, join our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and get all of the updates on our upcoming videos. We do a lot of these mod guides, we do wars, and we do just fun little things as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.